Welcome back to the Grimm Workshop. Today we're going to be whip finishing a knife handle. A lot of the Grimm cards have a cutting tool on them, and there is a really good reason for that. A cutting tool is your #1 survival tool. Now, all of these knives are going to come right off the cards, and you can use them right away. I've used a Grimm knife before to actually skin a deer. Now, just because you can do it doesn't mean it's always the most comfortable thing. If it's a longer situation or you've got a bigger task ahead of you and you have the proper cordage, you can make these knives a lot more comfortable to use if you just wrap the handle. This is going to work on any of the Grimm knives. This is the Bob Hansler, and it's actually marked on here to wrap with fishing cordage. This is the Biko Wright. Same thing. If you've got a handle on it, you can sure wrap it and make it a lot more comfortable to use. Here's the Zach Fowler's. This is going to work on the Hot Shot card, either the old model or the new model. But today we're going to be using the Bushcraft card. So if you've got paracord or some other type of cordage, you can just wrap this around it, hold it in your hand, and it's going to be more comfortable to use. But we're going to be using a whip finish on this. So with a whip finish, there's no real knots in the cordage. You're able to recover every bit of cordage that you use, take this knife and put it back on the card when you're done. So as far as material for this, a lot of people just jump right to paracord, and that is completely fine. I use and carry paracord. For some of the smaller knife handles, it's just a little too bulky, and you can use the inner strands, and I could braid the inner strands and make them kind of an intermediate size. But I do carry material as well. These are the micro spools. So I carry tons of material on this. These are a great way to keep things. So I've got jute twine on one. I've got duct tape, I've got snare wire, I've got bank line. Here is a plastic bottle cordage making tool in case I was to run out of cordage. So a great way to carry it. So I'm going to utilize this today. We're going to use some of this jute twine to do our handle wrap. So if you've never wrapped a knife handle before, this does take more material than you think it will. A little knife like this, I'm going to cut a piece about 18 inches long. Now that cordage again is recoverable. When you're done with that project and you decide to move on, you can unwrap this knife handle, put the knife back on your card, and use the cordage for another project. So I'm going to kind of eyeball about 18 inches or so. So when you're dealing with this jute twine, it wants to unwrap itself. So if you've got chapstick or wax of any type, it's going to help it hold together a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knife handle and I'm just kind of lay out my loop. Now I want a tail on the back side of at least this big. If this was double the length, I'd be okay with it. Now I've got a loop in the front. So that loop has to extend past where I want the cordage to stop. So I'm going to stop my cordage right around here somewhere. So I'm going to start on the tail end of the knife. I'm going to give myself just a couple wraps. Pretty tight to establish the pattern here. And let's look at it. That seems to be okay. So I'm going to keep my wraps nice and tight. So right now I've wrapped it as far around as I can. I can't go around an extra time. So I'm going to take this and just pass it through this loop. Here we are. Now when I grab this tail and start to pull it, it's going to close that loop and it's going to pull the tail under the handle. Now that's pretty tight right there. So that tag end is tucked in nice and hard, and I'm not really getting anything else out of that. Now I'm just going to singe it down with a little bit of flame. Now this backside piece, I could use an arrowhead or another tool if I had one and trim this off. If this was long enough, I could also tie a lanyard in here pretty easy. This length here isn't doing me a lot of good. I'm just going to go ahead and burn through it. So if there's any little hairs like this sticking off, you can just get in here and singe them down. And that is a nice looking primitive handle. There's a lot of different techniques to wrap the tool handle. This one's pretty good. This is kind of my go-to. And when you start using jute twine like this, the fact that you can singe the handles down, it gives it a nice primitive look. And it's actually a comfortable handle to use. It's got a little bit of grit to it. When you start running a flame over it, it makes it look a whole lot better. And if you've got access to chapstick, if you've got any type of ointment in a first aid kit, if you've got wax, all that just smooths the handle down and makes it that much more comfortable to use.